I'm Megan.
I'm CJ.
And I'm Erica.
And this is the Her Podcast.
Ooh, we're so excited to sit down with journalist, CTV morning host, and community leader, Joelle Tomlinson. Joelle is passionate about having intentional conversations, and that clearly shines through in her work and has led her to work at a local, national, and international level. We chat all things with her on this one, you guys. Her love of running, and I don't mean just like a little bit. This girl has run a 100-kilometer race. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. We touch on topics like what it was like losing her brother to drugs and why she shares her story and finds it so important to share your experiences. Her top tips for making friends when you move to a new city and why having a good but small circle of friends can be beneficial. What it was like to grind for 10 years in her industry and growing up biracial and how she navigates being a news anchor. You're going to want to turn it up, get cozy. Listen to this one. It's so, so good.
Okay, so I feel like I've known you for a while, but Erica just told us you guys went to camp together.
One summer.
Oh my gosh, no, I remember you. You were like a bundle of energy.
Of course.
Is accurate.
Yeah.
I remember, this is going to be so weird. I remember your bathing suit so clearly.
Was it a tankini?
It was a tankini with monkeys on it.
Yep, I wore it all the time. Paul Frank?
Yes.
Oh,
that's why. I was like,
so
why
funny.
are there monkeys? Yes, it was. That makes more sense to me. That I'm like, it was Paul Frank.
And
Okay.
weirdly enough, I remember you commenting on the bathing. I totally know. I didn't put two and two together, but I remember. I loved camp. It was so fun. Like horseback riding, archery.
So obviously we kind of know you a little bit and we've been following you for a long time. But in case some of our listeners don't know who Joelle Tomlinson is, can you let us know who you are and a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are today working in TV?
I'd love to. I'll give you the abbreviated version because I'm a bit of a chatterbox. But I am Saskatoon, born and raised. Go Prairies. Yeah, of course. So born back in 1990. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that version. So yeah, anyway, born and raised in Saskatoon. Obviously grew up, it's a small community. So knowing quite a few people back in the 90s, early 2000s, and decided at some point I was going to pursue journalism and made that decision pretty early on. So I would say I grew up in the sports world, but also I was like this kind of secret geek. Like I didn't really like to tell anyone that I really loved school and I really loved reading and I really loved writing. So I had like this alter ego where it was like sports all the time, hang with my friends, and then like study secretly behind the scenes because the school I wanted to get into was a tough school to get into. So I moved to Toronto to pursue my dream in journalism and fast forward another 10 years and I'm living in Calgary, Alberta. I'm still missing home though, but living in Calgary, Alberta, and I'm a morning show host for CTV Morning Live, as well as a spin instructor here as well.
Which is, this is actually kind of funny because our last guest she was telling us her story and we were like, how long did it take you to get from point A to point B? And she's like, 10 years. And I think this is something we're hitting on with people is really recognizing the work that goes into your dream and that, it does take a lot of effort. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to that time period. Like you moved to Toronto and were you like, oh my goodness, small prairie girl in the big city. I don't know if I can cut it. Like what did that process look like? Because the idea for me of getting on TV, I'm like, how do you even do that? Like, I don't even know.
Well, and what made you want to get into journalism? And how did that start for you?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Erica, because that's like the number one question I get. Everyone's like, I'm confused about this gray area where you exist in real life and now all of a sudden you're on a TV screen.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to elaborate on it because it does, like you just touched on, takes so much work behind the scenes. And it's not this traditional gig where that you go to school for this, you get this certification and then XYZ happens. And it's also a very non-guaranteed kind of gig. A lot of people pursue journalism and end up somewhere else. And wherever they end up is perfect for them, I'm assuming. But even in my graduating class of, 200 people back in 2012, I think there's less than 10 of us on air. So it's definitely a career that if you're going to pursue it, you have to be aware that it's going to take a lot of hard work, and maybe your dream will take you elsewhere. And that's perfect. So I guess in terms of CJ's question, journalism, I got to throw it back to, what was that show called where she wrote columns? She went on dates with that guy, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
Oh, yeah.
I wish I had something more inspirational to say, but I watched that movie and I was like, I am Andy Anderson.
Kate Hudson of all people. I love that. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Right?
So
I decided, sorry, go ahead.
No. Keep going. I have a question for you after.
Oh, yeah. So I decided that I wanted to be a writer. I was going to go out and do assignments, and I was going to hand it into the editor, and I was going to be like a big girl about town. Got really into that. And then apparently I'm very influenced by movies. Blood Diamond came out, and I was like, and I'm going to go overseas and I'm going to report on inequities as well. So I went from wanting to date Matthew McConaughey to being like, and I'm going to showcase the plight of people all around the world. Wow. So I knew that writing and communication and delivering stories was always in me. I didn't know how to funnel that in. And I was really fortunate that my aunt lives in Toronto. Okay. She's like, the school to go to is Ryerson University, which is now called Toronto Metropolitan University. They just changed the name. Yeah. So I put my nose to the grindstone and I put together a portfolio in grade 11 because you had to be published. And I started harassing editors and news directors in Saskatoon at like 15 years of age. Like, can I please do a story for you? I'm sure they were terrible, but bless those people because I got published. I put together my portfolio and I got into the journalism program at Ryerson 2 weeks before the acceptance because I was waitlisted. I didn't even get in right away.
Oh my gosh.
That is actually incredible to me because I would sit in the very opposite camp of you. And if someone was like, these are all the things you have to do, and this just speaks to my personality, I would have been like, I don't want to be a journalist anymore. So
that's too much.
Yeah, that's too much. So I mean, I love that story. And I think that's so amazing. Did you always know, I have two questions. Did you always know you wanted to be on television? Because obviously I feel like journalism covers a broad spectrum of positions and jobs. And then did you experience a lot of no's in the beginning? Because I'm assuming you weren't just like, okay, I graduated and now I'm like the morning show like host. I assume there were some no's or some waiting along the way.
Yeah. So I did not want to be in television. Okay. Actually, I went into university being like, I will be writing for magazines. I will be maybe writing for a newspaper, but my goal was magazines. It's like just the content that I loved growing up. I was like the girl with all the magazine subscriptions. Went into school, and in my third year, you have to kind of major in something. And you mentioned there's different facets of journalism. So there's magazine, there's radio, there's print, which is newspaper, and there's television. And now there's more forms of multimedia, but at the time, those were the big ones. And I had been dabbling in TV class, and a prof actually talked to me and changed my entire direction in life because he came up and he's like, you got to do TV. And I was like, I don't really care for TV. And he was like, you've got it. Like, you need to be on TV, and not everyone here has it. And he's like, you can't just develop it either. He's like, listen, you're green, but you've got to do TV. And so I sat on that. I didn't really even want to, but it really inspired me to kind of just look back and see which direction I wanted my life to go. And I thought, hey, if I fail in TV or if it doesn't work, I can always fall back on writing. Like, I'm not going to lose writing. So I switched my focus, my major, into broadcast television. And that's how I ended up with TV. And in terms of the no's, I have gotten way more no's than I've ever gotten yeses. I applied to every job under the moon when I first started. And the job that I ended up getting was not on television. It was writing for a weekly community newspaper in Saskatoon.
Was it the Neighborhood Express?
It was called the Saskatoon Express.
Okay.
Do you remember it?
I do remember.
Yes. And, you know, I had applied to probably upwards of 15, 16, 17 jobs. And that was the only yes I got. So I moved back home from Toronto. I was the photographer reporter. So I would do like 12 stories a week and I would take all the photos for the paper. And the one thing that circled back is because as a 15-year-old, I had walked into Global News and been like, let me do stories for you. Let me intern for free. Let me work for you and just gain some experience. The director there remembered me and saw my name in the paper, and we connected. And that is how I landed my first television job.
Wow. And was that in Saskatoon?
Amazing.
Yeah. So I was the Breakfast Buzz community reporter for Global News Saskatoon. And there was a female leader there, Lisa Ford, shout out to her. She's at CTV now in Saskatoon. And she just nurtured young, emerging female talent. And yeah, I started out with the morning show at Global News, just doing little entertainment segments, and went from there to backfilling for the live reporter. So out on the scene, breaking news, doing fun community segments, skydiving, you know, going out on the river, whatever you wanted to do. I was like, yeah, I'm there. Give me a mic. Like, I'm in. And from there, I went to weather presenting for the morning show because our weather presenter left. So I fell into that role. And every time she was just like, can you try? Can you do it? And I was like, yes, let me try. Let me hone my skill. And from there is when I got noticed and actually pulled to Calgary. So that was the first time in my life someone noticed me, in the sense that I didn't apply, but I was doing the work, and I had done the work for 6-7 years, and it worked out for me, and it was nice, but it was not a fast process by any means.
No. And actually, I have a picture somewhere. You interviewed me like Yay! At the beginning of my Elizabeth Lynn journey, and I like brought all my jewelry, and like I have a picture somewhere. I'll have to find it.
Oh, that's so full circle. I love that.
Yeah.
How
so
cool.
Yeah. I remember going and being so nervous.
I bet I was like 23.
Oh, you were young.
Like maybe, yes. Just, and you were, you know, I still wear Elizabeth Lynn.
Thank
like
you.
all the, I might even have
that
one
looks like
right
one.
now.
Yeah, it looks
yes,
like one.
right here. I'm rocking one. That's serendipitous.
I love
wear it all the time.
Oh, yay.
Yes. So, you know, full circle moments.
I love it.
So how long have you been in Calgary now? How's that going? Where do you see your career? Like, where do you also like long term want to be? You know, because you mentioned that you're missing, you know, your, I don't know, family probably back here in your community in Saskatoon, right? And so I obviously travel back and forth for work a little bit as well between Calgary and Saskatoon. So I'm like, I resonate with you, you know, having your foot in two different places. And I'm curious how you navigate that.
Yeah, I've been in Calgary for 5 years now. I came to Calgary in 2017. So I guess coming in on 6 years, which I can't really fathom. I feel like the world was kind of like thrown up and shaken for the last couple of years, and we all just kind of like landed, but not on our feet. So we're all just like navigating what this new reality looks like. So I don't feel like it's been that long because of that specifically. But I'm happy here for now. And the reason I'm happy with Calgary is because it's this mix of who I am. Like, I was very big city Toronto, and I loved living there for school, and I loved the hustle and the bustle. But I also grew up in a city that allowed me to do sports and be outdoors and enjoy nature and go explore. So I have this mix now of the two cities. I have the Rocky Mountains an hour from my front door, yet I have the big city 10 minutes from my front door. So I kind of have this great enmeshment of Saskatoon and Toronto in Calgary. But in terms of community, like, I'll just say it, like, there is no community like Saskatoon. Like, I love the people. I love that city. I love the fitness community. I grew up with just such a great group of girlfriends that I couldn't praise more. And I feel like I I thrived so much because of my friendships in Saskatoon. And as I got older, I realized that's pretty rare. I didn't know what I had until I witnessed other people not having it. So my heart is always a big piece of my heart. I think I left behind on the Meewasin Trail. But I get home, I would say like 3 or 4 times a year, and I try and visit as many people as I can. And my mom and dad are still out in Saskatoon, so they're actually coming to visit me in Calgary tomorrow. But they'll it's so nice. But they'll host me, and they've got the same house I grew up in, and I get home, and it definitely gives me all the nostalgia, and just I have so many memories in that city. So yeah, just a great mix. And then you mentioned long term. I think the beauty is I don't have a 10-year plan. I don't even have a 5-year plan at this point, because not having those set rigid goals has actually allowed me to get to where I am today. I'm really very much I would say even minute by minute person, because things have fallen into my lap and I've decided whether to embrace them or not. And it's worked out for me. I don't know how other people, however they want to live their life and plan, that's, great for them. But for me, I think I'm just very spontaneous in terms of where my career has taken me. I've said yes to most opportunities. So maybe it takes me to a bigger city. Maybe it takes me home to Saskatoon in a whole different role. I think in the next 10 years, though, I'm definitely higher up in leadership. I'm definitely connected to my community. I'm definitely giving back. And if I'm doing all of those things, I think I'll be pretty content and pretty happy.
I love that.
I love that you said that, because I identify with living in the moment, and I identify with really being like, yes, sure, I'll try this, or no, that's not for me, right? And I kind of go for it. But I think what's been interesting for me is to navigate that alongside what feels very popular right now about, and I love goal setting, and I love sitting down and checking in at where you're at, but I feel there's a very big push on that end to be like, well, where do you want to be? And we say all the time, what's your North Star? What's your plan? But if you had done that, then when someone came to you and said, will you do the weather? You might have been like, oh, I'm not a weather girl.
Yeah.
But instead you were true. This is an opportunity, and maybe I am a weather woman. Maybe I do or maybe I am going to go to Calgary, or maybe I'm going to go somewhere else. And so I think there's this beautiful combination, right? Where you can have these dreams and aspirations, but also be I don't exactly know the path that will definitely get me there.
Well, none of us know the future, right? And so I think it's really important to hear people who are enjoying their career and their purpose, but aren't perfectly mapped out. Because like you said, even if you have a dream and a goal and a vision of where you want to go, something I'm hearing from a lot of entrepreneurs and, just people in their careers is you have to just say yes as things come up, right? And try things, right? And you started out wanting to possibly be in more writing, and now you're on TV and you found a niche in that, which is amazing.
I think that if we focus so hard on the one thing we want to happen, we really miss out on all those opportunities. And you spoke about having so many opportunities come at you. I'm so curious, has there been any that have really surprised you, that have come to you or caught you off guard, or that you're I couldn't imagine ever doing this, and here I am?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think actually it's funny you mentioned the weather presenting, because never in my life would I've been trust me to tell you the forecast. What do I know? So it came out of left field. I loved my job live reporting. I feel like it's what I was meant to do. I'm meant to be on scene. I'm meant to be face to face with people. And the opportunity came around, and my news director sat me down and pitched me this idea, and I was rocking in my chair, and I'm I don't even know which way is north sometimes. So
I was gonna say, I have no idea.
We all just identified with that really
literally.
Right? So I was really nervous about working with the green screen and the opposites, and knowing the high pressure systems and the low pressure systems, and knowing, that this system was sweeping over the Pacific and coming in over the western provinces.
Oh my gosh, you're giving me anxiety.
Is somebody feeding that information into you, or are you just
I'm
here we go?
Literally listening to my So I studied and I studied and I studied, and I called my father, who's a pilot, and I was like, explain systems to me. Like, let's do this thing.
And he's
so
like,
my
I've been waiting for this my whole life.
It's like, finally, Joelle, we talk about cold fronts. And I was like, okay, cold fronts, let's do this. So I think that was an opportunity that I was like, listen, if I want to be, if I want to get the exposure, if I want to get the experience, because it's ad-libbing, right? So that's the experience that you need to practice and you need to make your mistakes. I was like, this might be my opportunity. Am I thrilled about it in this moment? I'm not even sure, because I don't know what I'm jumping into.
Right.
So it was so scary. I think I was shaking through the first week of doing weather. And eventually I had a phenomenal co-host. Many people know her, Lisa Dutton. She's like famous in her own right.
Yes.
One of my dear, dear friends now. But she just was such a guiding mentor for me throughout that. And to have another like strong, empowered woman who was about 10 years older than me just support me and empower me, I think it made such a difference. And I can't praise her or other women who do that for other women more, because I think it changed my trajectory.
Hey friends, it's CJ here. Are you shopping for a baby gift? I need to let you in on a secret. B&B Craft Supplies is an online wholesaler of all things silicone beads and teethers, and they also have a variety of super adorable gifts for baby that anyone can purchase. B&B Craft Supplies offers a great gift selection of silicone bibs, bowls, and mats, educational toys like puzzles and stacking cups, boxes, trucks, diggers, sunflowers, cowboy boots, you name it, there's a teether for it. Or if you're feeling crafty, you can order your own bead supplies to make a special gift of your own. B&B offers hundreds of bead options with no minimums, so you can really get creative and have fun. Owned and operated in small-town Saskatchewan, B&B Craft Supplies is North America's largest supplier of specialty silicone beads. All of their products are BPA-free, PVC-free, 100% non-toxic, and made of food-grade silicone. Visit B&B Craft Supplies on Instagram, here you go guys, at B_and_B_craft_supplies to get inspired. Or head to b&bcraftsupplies.ca to shop hundreds of beads and teether options.
It really speaks to leadership and the shift in what I feel was like, and I'm blanket statement here, so let's just go there. But like, I feel like what was projected for a long time was like, if someone came in and was like, whatever, that newbie, that intern, it was almost like not to respect them, or like they were kind of beneath you.
Give them all the shit work.
Yeah, and like not want them to rise up. Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful example of someone being like, hey, you need to learn. And instead of me being like, I'm going to throw you out there and be like, figure it out. It's like, no, I'm going to help you. And I love that. I think that's amazing.
Yes, preach. And here's the thing, like one quote that's always stuck with me, or sentiment, is because we have more people at the table does not take away your spot at that table, right? Like, giving that power and that mentorship and that guidance to somebody does not take away from what you are doing. And I felt like she was almost a pioneer in that in my life, because what you're saying is still so prevalent in a lot of industries. And the broadcasting industry is pretty cutthroat, and it can be hard to, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's like we talk about all the time, like gatekeeping, and it's like earn your way in. And it's like, why not instead open the door and be like, let me help you. Here's what I learned, because we'll all work better if we're all working better, instead of like hoping someone can figure it out. Right. And, I think when people don't want to give information or don't want to help, I will just say, I think it's a lack of confidence in what your offer is.
Well, they're scared.
They're scared. They're
it's
like,
their insecurity
I'm nervous. I'm nervous this person's going to, but it's like, if you're confident in what you're doing, then it shouldn't matter if they're good at something too, which is what you're saying about the table.
Would you say that 100%. Like the media industry is more male dominated still?
So I would say there are more females in the media industry, but I would say, yes, it is male dominated. I think maybe I could take some flack for saying that, but if you looked at earnings and if you look at positions of power, you're going to see more men in positions of power. You know, you're going to see more decisions made by men. There's still a wage gap disparity in certain areas of media. So yeah, I would say that, though it's funny, like going to journalism school, I went 2008 to 2012, I would say it was 80% women. So, you know, we're there.
Yeah.
And in our newsroom, I would probably say we're split 50-50 in terms of employees. So I work with a lot of powerful, strong, intelligent women, and some of them are in great positions of power. You know, I defer to many of them throughout the day. But when you look at the bigger structure and the bigger system, yeah, I would say that it's male dominated.
Yeah. So I think that, like, I mean, in a lot of industries that many women would say, you know, we kind of have to fight our way through a little bit more. But you're also a biracial woman. So I'm so curious if you've experienced more challenges because of that.
Yes. Like the short answer is yes. I'm like, you know, it's, for instance, I think a really great example that I found out when I started in broadcast, my news director was a female. That's not very common. And she said that she was the first ever woman who was pregnant on air in Saskatchewan.
Oh,
and I'm like,
what?
Wait a minute. Like,
they
wait
used
a
to
minute.
Wasn't that hide him in the back or
yes,
what? Oh.
They wouldn't be allowed on air, first of all. Second of all, women were barely broadcasting, but that's within the last 50 years, right? Like, that's not, this isn't back when carriages were roaming the streets of Saskatchewan.
The horse, right?
Right. So that kind of tells you, like, the leaps and bounds we've had to take for the respect in the industry. I do feel like women are on the rise. I feel like we are, you know, asserting ourselves in the media. But I will say with intersectionality, so I am biracial, like you said, and for some reason, well, not for some reason, it is systemic, but there seems to be a little bit less representation. There's a little bit less respect from certain populations towards what I have to say versus perhaps what my co-host, who is a 50-year-old Caucasian male, there's a bit more deference towards him. There's a bit more authority given towards him, as regarded from the public, right? And another thing that I've really picked up on, and being a person of color on TV, unfortunately, is tokenism. And so a lot of people want to say, hey, look, like, we've got one. And it's like, hi.
Yeah.
So you're in this weird battle where it's like, do I take advantage of this because there needs to be this diversity, or do I call it like it is and say, don't just throw me in the role because I look a certain way, throw me in the role because I earned my spot, and I'm capable and I'm strong and I'm intelligent. So it's definitely been interesting. I know that a lot of my female counterparts have taken abuse from the public, whether it be online or out when we're reporting. But I will say mine are very directly related to racism. The comments directed at me are not always just, I don't like your outfit today. It's like, I hate your face. I've gotten ones that have said, watch your back. I've been called like a black biatch. We'll say it that way. That's a nice way to say it.
Right.
So it's interesting being in a public role when you look a bit differently, and I've grown a thick skin. Let's just put it that way.
I was just
very
thick
thick skin.
That. Yeah. Did you did you find you had to grow a thick skin as a child, or is that something that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You know, I don't think I developed the thick skin. I think I made some realizations that certain things were going to happen to me that maybe weren't happening to my friends. And as we know, Saskatchewan in the 90s, I mean, I was one of 3 Black people in my entire elementary school, one of them being my brother, the other one being me. And then into high school, I think there was maybe 4 or 5 of us in the entire high school. So it's pretty, you know, when you look a little different and maybe you have different experiences. I also had the unique experience of being adopted into a white family. So on top of that, I was called an Oreo, right? Like, well, she's black on the outside, white on the inside, right? So it was kind of this big identity struggle that I had probably up until the point of George Floyd. So that's not that long ago, where I really feel like I did assimilate into what people wanted. Even on air, I looked a certain way and I presented a certain way. And only recently, with the resurgence of BLM and just this like fight for equity that's become a little bit more front and center, have I been like, okay, so everyone also, like, I am black. Just so people know, and I'm not ashamed of it, and I want people to know, and it's how I identify, and I'm here to support other biracial, black, anyone of minority, anyone of any descent or ethnicity or culture or heritage, because we all deserve this spot. And it's been a really interesting experience. It's been great. It's been really empowering, and it's also been really scary and really enlightening.
That's what grace you have to use the word enlightening, I have to say. Like, I just felt anger for you.
You know, you kind of spoke to being a token and that line you have to walk. The idea of like, do I jump into this knowing I'm a token, but can make a difference, can choose to make a difference in this space, right? And whether that's been your experience or not, I think that's a line that would be very difficult to walk and navigate.
Well, I'm curious, you know, obviously you mentioned like some of the comments, right, that you're getting and the hardship that you've had to navigate through. And I'm like, maybe it looked different than it did before, you know, like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and now. But I'm like, how do you protect yourself, right? And how do you handle those comments and those things that come into your space that really don't belong there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Erica, you nailed it on the head. Like I tread a very interesting line between what I call being like a palatable Black person, because I also benefit from colorism, right? Like I'm a light-skinned Black person. So I've had to even learn that I have privilege that people who are darker than me do not have. And that was such a learning experience for me. And we need to see more representation of all different shades and colors and like I said, cultures on air. So I want to advocate, but I don't want to appear to be angry, which is also another, you know, stigma that you battle. I don't want to be the angry Black woman, but I want to be there and I want to represent, because I want a little 4-year-old girl with like a curly, beautiful hair and dark skin to look and say, hey, I can do that. That's so great. And I get messages like that from moms who have biracial daughters. And they've sent me videos of them being like, look, and it actually just, that brings me to tears because I didn't have that.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's been great to see, but I mean, some of them are easier to just wash aside than others. Some of them I'll get a direct hateful comment and I'll immediately just, you know, we're going to Facebook creep them, right? So I'll hit on the comment and I'm like, yo, you have 0 friends and 0 followers.
Yeah.
Like, you are either a bot or you are a very sad human with a very sad life. And I feel very sorry for you. Boy, bye. Like, that's fine. We'll just put that one out of the purview. Some of the more not so thinly veiled comments that actually have some oomph in them and maybe get me in the heart a little bit more. I do have to sit with it, but I have to compartmentalize because I have a job to do. Some of them come through, typically comments come through when I am on air. So I see them come through when my face is on camera. I'll read the comment and then I have to deliver a story. So I've gotten very good at just acknowledging it, putting it aside. If I need to deal with it later, I'll talk it out at home with someone I love or trust. I advocate for therapy. I've talked about it with my therapist. But very often I defer to the side of like, I just feel sorry for you. You are apparently uninformed. I don't know what your life has been like, but it makes me sad that you think this way. And, you know, I wish you all the best. And I've even said that to people. I'm sorry you feel this way. I wish you all the best. If you ever want to be educated, here are some links. And I'm open to a conversation. Sometimes I don't get the best responses to that, but and that's more energy than I should be putting into some of these comments.
Just going to say, that's like, you're going above and beyond there to be like, and here's some links to better yourself.
Yeah.
Even though you're terrible.
I know.
I thought,
I'm like, also you suck.
Yeah. But here you go.
Joelle, I was actually waiting for you to be like, how I deal with it is I go and I run intense runs that are so wild. I like watch you and I'm like dying watching you. I'm like, you are incredible. And not to like completely pivot, but that's what I thought you were going to be like, I work out a lot. And that's how I like work out this
ready
stuff.
for the fitness aspect.
I was ready.
You know
not
what?
this like
That's
very calm demeanor. That's just like, bless them and we'll educate them and move on.
So many endorphins from all of the running and spinning she does.
Yes, that's what it is. I'm just a really calm Zen person. No, anyone who knows me knows I am turbo and I have no calm. And you're right. I really love fitness, like to a point of where it's like ingrained into every pore of my body. But I was always an athlete growing up, and that's a really great point. It's actually really insightful of you to say, because you're right. I do go out and run a lot of the times when my brain's kind of going a million miles a minute. And what actually slows it down and brings me into one thought is going for a run. I know for some people, they're like, pardon me, that sounds horrendous. Totally understand that. I do, because not every run for me is a good one. But I have been running my entire life.
You did track, right?
I did do track.
You did do track.
I did track and soccer and hockey and lacrosse and volleyball. Those were kind of like my
turbo.
Sports.
Wow.
Her parents, they just threw me in everything.
Kept going.
They're like, we got a space in the schedule. Lacrosse.
She is a well-rounded
like,
athlete.
Throw something else at this girl.
Yes.
So when I was in university, they didn't have a hockey team, which was kind of my plan all along. They had a rec hockey team, but they didn't have a varsity one. And I didn't have money, as we all know what that feels like in university. Yeah. And so I just was like, I guess I can run. So I just started running the waterfront in Toronto. And then this girlfriend of mine, one of my best friends actually, was like, yo, I think you can run a half marathon. And I was like, those people are out of their minds. Like, absolutely not. You couldn't pay me to run a half marathon. And she's like, listen, I run it with my mom. It's great. I'll run it with you. We'll take it nice and easy. I was like, okay, fine, sure. So I ran this half marathon with my girl Christy, and there is this video of the finish line, and I'm like stumbling. I'm acting like I just ran for 24 hours. I'm like barely finding the finish line. I'm like, that was terrible. I'm never doing that again. And somehow I ended up getting hooked, and I went from halves to full marathons. And then I was like, all right, let's try a 50 miler. So I went into the 50 miler, which is about 82K. And then I was like, all right, let's see if I can run 100K. And so I ended up doing a 100K race 2 years ago. And that's been my maximum distance. And I think we're good. I think we're okay.
Didn't you just do something like recently? Or like in the fall?
Yeah, I just ran the Mesa Marathon.
Only because
it wasn't 100.
Only because your post was like, I threw up at the end.
But it's like,
I loved that reel.
That Arizona heat.
I was just like, wow. I'm like, you are hardcore. Like, I ran a 10K once, and it's like my biggest like trophy. I'm like, look at this 10K that I did.
10K
and I'm like,
to 100. Yeah,
it's nothing. Like, anyone can run a 10K. Like.
I can't.
Not true. I was going to say anyone who runs, I'm like, listen, 2 feet in a heartbeat, you're a runner. Like you can do it. We can all run for a block, but I just did the Mesa Marathon. I actually did the half. I was trying to get a personal best, which I hadn't done in a long time. And I could just taste it. Like, I was like, this is happening. This is my race. Like, I'm going to get my PB, and I'm going to come in faster than I ever have. And I was like, uh-oh. Like, I was in the last kick, and I'm like, no, I am getting this personal best. So I just pushed, and I crossed the line, and everyone's like, woo, woo, woo. And I'm like, and I'm panicking, and I'm like looking around. This sweet volunteer holds out her bag, and I'm like, boom, head down, vomited up Gatorade into this bag. So there is a photo of me, and I'm like holding up this bag of Gatorade vomit. And and my medal. And I'm like, I did it.
That's just amazing. I love that. What does your husband think about this? Because he doesn't run with you, right? Or does he?
He hates me.
Okay.
He hates it. He thinks it's silly. He owns a gym, so it's funny that he just despises cardio. But he used to say things like, I don't understand you. This is wild. Like, who wants to run for 20 hours straight? And has now been with me long enough to realize it's just like my place. It's where I belong. It's what I love doing. So he supports me, and he's just like my sideline buddy. He calls himself, am I allowed to swear on the podcast?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. He calls himself the snack bitch because he always is present with snacks for me.
Well, now
I'm always hungry.
What
he
a
needs
great
to
way to
have
show
a
up.
puke bag too, just in
Yeah,
case.
that's
Yes,
Unfold
I
that.
need a puke bag. I need like a chocolate bar, a banana, and then we're like good to go. So yeah, it's been a really fun experience. And those ultras that I run, like, you do actually need a support crew. It's part of the whole experience. So he will like go to the checkpoints and drive around, and like he'll be like waiting at the checkpoint with like McDonald's fries.
Oh
and I'm
my
like,
gosh.
awesome. I'll like crush the fries, and I'll be like, see you in a couple hours, and then I'll just kind of take off again. And
Wild.
it's a weird, wild world, but I love it.
Would it be fair to say that running is a sort of a therapy for you?
I think so. I think it definitely quiets my mind. I've always been a little bit too much going on in the brain and a million thoughts. So I think so. I think it's like my time too when I get my best ideas. It's my time to like, there's not TV on in the background. There's not anything but like my breath and my thoughts. Sometimes I listen to music. A lot of times I don't, just because I feel like when I'm in tune with my body, I can just think and be free. And I love running with friends. The best conversations have come out of those long runs with my friends. Because there's no other distractions. You're just working, and it's really raw and authentic. And I think that's why I love it so much. I have a run community. You're right. It's a form of therapy for me. And it's also a way for me to challenge myself physically.
I'm like picturing, because I used to run for like a hot second.
Well, yeah, you did the 10K.
I lived in Asia, and I basically, when I lived in Asia, I like needed something to do. So I was like, I'm going to learn to run, essentially. But I still am like, your girl was never talking when she was running.
It's like you,
So conversations, you're like, no.
Well, I love
I'm like the nodding conversation.
I love that you said you have vulnerable conversations, because I would think like that's a very vulnerable place to be. Like, you're pushing yourself, you're in this physical space, and you're, like that's
probably like a bit euphoric, right? Like you could get that runner's high, I imagine, right?
Yeah. It's, I think like Megan nailed it in the sense that, I talk with my run girlfriends, and like we've seen each other at our worst. We've seen each other at our best. We've seen each other break down in tears, and we talk about the fact that you can be really vulnerable because you're running side by side, but there's this weird safety because you're looking ahead. So you're not locking eyes with this person. And it's almost like you feel so safe. You're side by side, you're talking, you're looking forward. And it's just such a judgment-free zone. And I can just think about, like, it makes me almost emotional to think about, because the friendships that I've made through it, I never would have made them without pushing myself to those limits. And like you said, to that sort of version of a runner's high. And when I was doing, it was 108 kilometers. That was the race that I did 2 years ago. And I was at 80 some kilometers, and I came to the checkpoint, and I was in tears. And I had my girlfriends there because they'd run the half distance. So they'd done the 54, and it was my goal to do the full thing. And they came up to me, and I was bawling in my chair, and I said, I can't do it. Like, I'm like, this is wild. I have to go run another half marathon up this mountain. Like, I'm tapped. I'm sore. I can't feel my hips. I can't feel my feet. I'm like, I'm in so much pain. And one of my girlfriends strapped on my bag and said, let's go. And she ran 25K with me, and she'd already done 54.
Yeah.
So I think of that, and I'm like, that came from vulnerability on the trails together. That came from running together. Like, out of the goodness of her heart, she carried my pack for me and would be like, hey, Joelle, time to drink. And she would like hold out my, it's called a bladder, but she would hold out the hose, and I would like suckle from the teat. be like,
as one does when they're running.
Yes, as one does. And I think back to that moment, and I just think what a gift that this sport has given me.
I just got chills.
It gave me these people.
Big chills.
It was pretty special.
Wow.
Shout out to Teal. Yeah.
Oh,
so
that's like, movie stuff.
Amazing.
And it really speaks to community, right? It really speaks to the support systems we have in place that do matter.
Yes.
And that while we can do things alone, sometimes it's great to not do them alone, right? And so that's
1,000%.
Yeah.
And for me, it's running, and for other people, it's whatever gives them joy.
Exactly.
Right? So
picture this. White walls, floors, and furniture pieces with beautiful natural light flooding in. Sounds dreamy, right? Well, it is. The White Space Photo Studio. Located in the heart of downtown Saskatoon, this gorgeous studio is the perfect backdrop for photography. Perfect for a wide range of photography sessions, including portraits, headshots, and product photography, the bright and clean backdrop is the perfect space to book in for any type of photos. We have booked the White Space for our podcast shoots and can tell you from experience how great it is. Just check out the photos on our feed. Owned and operated by Nicole Romanoff, a talented and experienced photographer who knows the importance of a great atmosphere and the little details that make all the difference. Think about a fully stocked espresso machine, a makeup station, a wardrobe rack, and a beautiful sitting area. These are a few of the touches added to the White Space to enhance your experience. Available for booking 7 days a week in multiple time slot options, you can find the White Space on Instagram at thewhitespaceYXE and book in at www.nicoleromanoff.com/whitespace, linked in the show notes.
I always hear people say, I got to get into it. I need to start running. And I'm always like, hey, if running gives you no joy, don't worry. This isn't some club that you have to join. I grew up doing this. It comes so naturally to me. If you asked me to go to a dance class, I would be like Night at the Roxbury in the back. Like, it's not my thing. Right. But, I think people can reflect and listen to this and be like, well, my community happens to be this. Mm-hmm. And it's so special. And you're right. Being an individual and doing things on your own is great, but there's something really empowering about having people who are going to root for your rise, even if you're not in the room. Right. And that's how I feel about my run crew.
I love that. That's so amazing. And I think like our listeners, can probably reflect and be like, what is my community? Right. And where do I sit and where do I identify? I'm curious. So like, obviously running has been a big portion for you, but I'm like, you've lived in these multiple cities, which you've kind of already touched on, but I'm like, how do you tap into a community you have, but in a new city, right? Because we have people who listen who probably like move or in a new area and like making new friends and like putting yourself out there can be really scary. And so I'm curious because you've done that a few times, what your advice would be.
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I went Saskatoon, Toronto, Vancouver, Saskatoon, Calgary. So I've moved quite a bit. It's always very, very scary. The move to Calgary was the scariest because I had nobody. And I moved up alone, and my boyfriend at the time stayed home in Saskatoon, and we just went long distance for a while because we weren't sure that it would work out. So what I did immediately was I literally got on the Google box. Like I was like, run clubs in Calgary, spin studios in Calgary, because I knew that I connected through people, with people through fitness. I knew that was, having been a spin instructor in Saskatoon, I knew that was a way to connect with people. Yeah. So I got really fortunate in that sense. So I would say, like, if you have a passion, if you have an interest, like, just see if there's some community groups out there. I also had to gear myself up and like pep talk myself and be like, okay, you're going to go and you're going to like talk to somebody and it's going to be a little weird because making friends as an adult can be a little awkward. It's like dating. You're like, hey, like, you're kind of cool. Like, what do you do? Oh, never mind. Like, we don't vibe. So let's move on to the next. And like, so I did that. I went to Run Crew, which is through Lululemon here in Calgary. I know they have it in Saskatoon as well. And that's how I met the girlfriend who ran the 100K with me. So it's it was having to like break through. I think people assume I'm an extrovert. I'm very much an ambivert. So I really do love my alone time, and I'm not actually going to throw myself into a group and make myself, the center of attention and chat everyone up. So I would have to be like, all right, I'm going to target that person. We're going to chat. We're going to see if we can actually,
I've creeped them on Facebook. I know a little bit about them.
Yeah. I'm like, listen, we might have some things in common. Like we both have a dog. Like, everyone can talk about their dog, right?
Totally.
So I would say like find something you have in common, chit chat it up, like feel out your gut intuition. And chances are, if they're there also alone, they're also maybe looking for a connection. So they're going to be grateful that you came up and chatted with them. I'm very fortunate to just have like a pretty light sense of humor. So I've always used that as my in with people. I like to put people at ease. It's kind of just been one of those, it might be one of those things that I've just had my entire life. I really have noticed that I use my humor in all situations, just kind of like make everyone comfortable. So I would say be light, easy with people, chit chat them up, find your common interests and look for it. Like it's not always going to come to you, unfortunately. Right. So I had to come in and seek out the community. I also immediately started teaching at a studio. That really helped me in Calgary. I also decided to volunteer. Volunteering, like giving back, you're going to meet other incredible like-minded people who are also giving back to the community, who might be doing something cool outside of their volunteering. So those are kind of my like little tips and tricks. I know it's not a magic pill to like make friends and be popular, but
no, but that's great.
It's been, yeah.
Right? Like it's important to just hear other people's perspectives and how you forge forward, right? And I'm like, that's very tangible. That's amazing.
Well, and making friends as adults and as women
different
is so hard, and not hard in like there's people everywhere, but I'm like the vulnerability to put yourself out there to be like, I'm literally looking for a friend. Like this is like
it's so easy when you're a kid because you just like run up to someone on the playground and you're like, want to be friends? Great, we're going to play this now. Like I watch my son do that all the time, and I'm just like I love the audacity that kids have, or just like, let's go.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's very, very cool.
100%. It's such a different game, and like it's different as you get older, because I used to be the person who was like, more the merrier, give me every single friend. I want every single person to like me. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten selective, and I really want certain type of individuals around me, and I want to surround myself with that love and support. And as you get older and you're making new friends, that can be a really hard thing to cultivate. And I've been very, very fortunate that I have managed to do so in Calgary, but I noticed that my friend circle has gotten much smaller, but it's so much quality in that small group rather than just being the person that's kind of friends with every single human under the moon. And it's okay that maybe some people don't take to me, and that's fine. That's something as I've gotten older, I've been at peace with. So yeah, making adult friendships, definitely. You're like, as a kid, you're like, I like your shirt.
Yeah.
Cool. We're best friends now.
Totally. Yeah. So easy.
Yeah.
Or your Paul Frank bathings.
Yeah, right? Like, we've got that connection for life. That was a dope bathing suit.
That was a dope bathing suit. It was so good.
I wish it still fit.
I know, so good. She like pulls it out. No.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
I love that advice. I think that's really good.
If I can pivot in a little bit of a way, you mentioned when you said that you were adopted by a white family, were you and your brother both adopted?
We were both adopted
together.
So my older brother was actually adopted 18 months before me. He was from a Jamaican family.
Okay.
And then I was adopted from half Jamaican, half white. And then I was adopted from an African and a Caucasian woman. So we had completely different, we're both black, but he's Caribbean descent and I'm African descent. So he was adopted. 18 months later, I came along and I was adopted by the same parents. And then 5 years later, my parents, who were told they couldn't have children, had my little sister.
Oh my goodness.
So
wow.
Very interesting family dynamic.
Yeah. Were you and your brother close in age?
Yes. So we were 18 months. So we were both adopted at birth.
Babies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's actually a really cool story because my parents have been trying for years to have children and it just wasn't happening for them. And they managed to adopt Stefan. And my birth mom had been looking for a family and was more attracted to trending more towards maybe a family with some people of color in it, so that maybe I had a bit of identity with them. And she'd been leaning towards a Black family, I believe, in Regina, Saskatchewan. And as she was flipping through the book of like success stories, she saw the picture of my parents with their little mixed boy, which was my brother. And she's like, I really wanted her to have an older brother. Aww. So yeah, exactly. So it's a cute story, and it would be funny because they told us that as kids. And so when he was like, I hate you, I was like, you are the reason I'm here, sir.
That's all your fault.
Yeah. So yeah, we were really, really, we were really close, and we had that kind of camaraderie of being like, you know, struggling a little bit with where you fit in and what you look like, and just kind of finding our footing. I always kind of had a partner in crime in that.
Yeah, because you got to navigate it together.
Well, and now, like, so I'm going to pivot a little bit, but stay on track. I don't know, like, your full story, but I do know that you lost your brother. And so, if you're comfortable sharing, I'm not familiar with that story, and I know our audience may or may not know that, but you and your brother you're speaking on were very close. Can you tell us how that came about and how you've worked through that?
Yeah, that was almost to the day 7 or 8 years ago. So almost, it was on February 28th. Yeah, so pretty close. And if you do the math, you can realize we were very young when it happened. Yeah, it was pretty horrible. So what happened was I had moved away to school, and we remained close while I was in Toronto, and he was in Saskatoon. But unfortunately, during that time, he made some decisions that weren't healthy, and he made some decisions that sent him down a path of dabbling with drugs and, you know, getting involved with, unfortunately, the law. He got in some trouble, and I don't think I had realized, being removed from the situation, how bad it was getting. I know my parents were a little bit frustrated, but you just think, classic 19-year-old guy kind of going through the works. I really do feel like some of that identity stuff that I talked to you guys about, I think that played a bigger part in his life than it even did in mine. So I think he was just really struggling with himself. So yeah, unfortunately, he started dabbling in drug use and dealing. I ended up getting caught for that, and serving some time. And that was a really, really hard time in our family's life, in terms of kind of coming to reality with, you hear these stories, but you never put yourself in that position. And not only that, I was young and unsure how to even relay that to people in my life. So I didn't tell anyone. You know, I was in my early 20s, and I was like, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Let's just soldier on and get through this. It's a phase. Nobody needs to know. My best friends don't need to know. So they didn't realize what I was going through during that time. Then I moved home, and it was getting worse. I'll never forget, there was one day I got this call from his roommate, and he's distraught, and he's saying that, unfortunately, Stefan, I don't know if he had taken something. I don't know what happened, but he went out in the middle of the night, in Saskatoon in the middle of winter. It was like minus 46 without a jacket, and he was just walking around outside. And all I could think was, this is, my brother's going to die. I was like, we've heard these stories in Saskatoon. I report these stories. We know this happens every winter. So I just blew out the door and was like driving around Saskatoon, just looking for a person walking around. So, and that's something I never shared with anyone. Like, I was distraught, and it was a really, really, really hard time in my life to just kind of keep that almost secret, which in hindsight, I wouldn't have done that now, but I was a little ashamed. I was scared. I was 21 years old. I didn't know what to do. And then he ended up spending some more time behind bars, and everything seemed fine. He got clean, which, you know, people can say what they want about the system, but he was able to get clean, and our relationship was starting to mend. Obviously, there were some fractures that had happened. I was like, what are you doing? You're making these bad decisions. And it was a couple of years after that, and I knew things weren't great, but I didn't know where they were. Yeah. And unfortunately, he went out. He was having a great time with his friends, and he took a pill that he thought was Oxycontin, and he went to bed, and he never woke up. So it was just so tragic in the sense that I feel like he was on this pathway back to maybe who he was, or figuring out his life. He was not, involved in a lot of the things that had gotten him into trouble anymore. I can't speak to how much drug use he was doing, but I know he wasn't taking fentanyl. Like it was a tainted pill. And it was also right when that started happening.
Right.
So we didn't know about fentanyl at that time. We didn't know how dangerous it was. We didn't know that it was being mixed into these street drugs that were just going across Canada. And I remember getting the call the next day. It was my dad called me, and he just said, "Your brother died." And I was like, "What?" Like it went over my head, and I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, that's what?" And he just said, "Stefan," and then his voice just broke. And I remember I screamed, and I dropped my phone, and my best friend came over because I called her screaming, and I don't, like, it's all a blur.
Yeah.
It was horrific, and it was so unexpected. And I think one of the parts that was really, really tough about that was it was in the news. So my station was reporting my own brother's death.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was a very unique position that I would not wish upon anyone. I returned to work in like 4 days because I didn't know what to do. I just put my armor on and went in, and I just kind of blocked it from my head because I had to go laugh and smile and be on air and be a live reporter. And I don't think I really dealt with it until years later when I truly did start having mental breakdowns over what the trauma that my family had experienced. So that's when I started actually going to therapy, was years later. And I think that's something that maybe the people who listen to this, or maybe people who are going through their own issues or struggles or trauma or whatever it may be, whatever you are dealing with, is that it's not linear, right? Like, I didn't experience the grief the way that we traditionally experience grief. I was like out doing rallies 6 months later and advocating and speaking about my experience. And then 3 years later, I broke down and went through depression and wasn't a great partner to my now husband, and wasn't a great friend at times, and made poor decisions. And that was years and years after the incident happened. But I finally started to kind of unpack what had happened. And I think it was because I still had to perform. So I'm better now. Like I said, it's been 8 years, but I think you just grow around the grief rather than having been done with it.
Yeah, we just spoke with a guest, actually, a grief specialist, I guess.
I would call her that.
And she talked about how grief, did she say the weight of it? Like, it gets lighter as time goes on, but it doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away.
Like, it will always be there. And we have this idea that grief, like, ends. And it's like no,
period
it
of time.
just eventually gets lighter. And it will always be there, but maybe not as heavy as it was, the day after, the year after, all of these things. And I mean, you share about it on social. Like, I've seen posts before. And so I think is that something that you're like, I'm sharing because I'm grieving the loss of my brother, and also because you want to bring awareness to it? Like, is that something that's really important to you?
It is. I think I share for a few reasons. One being, it is cathartic for sure, for people to understand me a little bit better. And to understand that, like, I see you, and I may be sitting on a desk and delivering this news to you, but I'm human, and I have been through it, and I empathize with you, and I sympathize with you, and I know what I'm talking about when it comes to feeling these things. I share because if it makes a parent talk to their kid, if it makes a sibling talk to their sibling, if it turns someone's head and makes them change the direction, if I've saved one life, then it's worth it to share my story, because I really strongly believe it will save a life. I think I've had parents message me afterwards and say, I'm sitting my boys down to talk to them about the dangers of this. I'm like, great, because we didn't have that talk. And it's too late for me, but it's not too late for somebody else. So there's that piece as well. And I think too, like, part of my job makes me seem unapproachable to people. And I want them to know, like, I'm open to chatting. I'm very approachable, and I'm very, like I said, human. I want to hear your experiences, and I want to maybe make you feel better, or even if not, just like I'm a listening ear, and I'll understand what you're going through. And I read this book called The Grief Club. It's by Melody Beattie, and it just talks about, it's this club that, like, nobody wants to be a part of, but eventually we all kind of join it, whether it be through sudden tragedy, like in my case, or, whether it be someone's lost their grandmother that's 110 years old, right? Like, whatever it is, you're going to join the club. And it might not be death. It might be grieving something else in your life, grieving a relationship, grieving, there's so many different forms of grief that we go through. But I will say, like, losing my brother at 23 years of age, it may seem almost wrong to say it, but it made me a better person. Like, it made me kinder. It made me embrace life more. It made me a better friend in the end. And it made me a better human, like, in my environment, because every single person, I am not alone in this story. I meet people every day who have their own version of this story. And I just feel like it made me just take a step back from, like, me, all about me, to, like, really embracing the collective. So I feel like that's one takeaway that I kind of cling on to. It's changed me, and it's changed me for the better.
Well, and I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. I think sometimes we tiptoe around that topic, but I think universally, and at least in this room who you're speaking with, would say that when you experience something really awful, you kind of have two choices. And you can choose to either let it completely break you and change you. No matter what, you will be changed by that. You will be changed. Like, you're not walking away from that experience being the same Joelle. So it's now choosing, am I going to let this light a path for positivity, or am I going to, go this other way that's maybe now I'm going to step into these bad decisions, or I'm going to, be bitter my whole life. And I'm not sitting here judging anyone who walks down that path of pain. But I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, I lost my brother, and the outcome of that for me personally, while heartbreaking, was I am now changed for the better because of my experience.
It is. And I would give anything. I would give up all my worldly possessions to have him back. And that's not to say I didn't go through an ugly period, because I did. I really did. I went through this, like, incredibly dark time in my life that I feel like I couldn't have gotten out of without the support of my friends and family. But yeah, if I can help someone through that, I think that's, like, my purpose in life. A lot of times I've always felt like this weird purpose to assist others and help others and lift others and storytell. I've always felt like I want to tell other people's stories. It's tattooed on my body. So that's what I want to do. I was at an event, and I talked about my brother. I was hosting an event for the mustard seed, which helps vulnerable Calgarians. And I just quickly told them about my brother, to make them understand that I knew where they were at. And I got approached by a young girl afterwards, and she just lost her brother in the same manner a year prior. And it took everything in me not to just, like, embrace her and hug her. But what that did was just give her a moment where it's like, wow, this news anchor who's 15 years older than me knows exactly what I've been through. And she was brave enough to come up and share her story. So there's just so much power in sharing, and people don't have to share. I would never pressure anyone to, unload anything on anyone if they don't want to. But I would say it's worked well for me, and it's worked for people who've entered my lives because of it.
I always say that the power of sharing experiences is just, like, felt so much farther than we think. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful gift.
it is a beautiful gift, and it's one that you can cherish. If someone wants to divulge their details to you, they're trusting you with that. And there's something really, really special about that, and it just transcends you know, a normal relationship. And I was mentioning my tattoo, like it says the truth about stories is that's all we are. And it's a Thomas King quote, and it's just about the importance of oral storytelling amongst Indigenous communities, actually, is where it's from. But I just like live that. Like that's how I live my life. I'm like, I want to know your story. I want to know how you feel. I want to know what you've been through. And I really, really care, and always have and always will.
It's just so beautiful.
That's so impactful.
Yeah.
That's like the perfect, that's so good. I see that we're coming towards the end of our time together today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for opening up and sharing your story with us. I think something that I've personally taken away is just that human element, that at the end of the day, right, we're all a part of this collective of humanity, and we all have stories and things and challenges that we bring to the table. And so we've really enjoyed hearing your perspective. So again, thank you. But something that we like to ask all of our listeners at the end of our conversations is we'd love to know a piece of advice that has been really impactful for you in your life.
Yeah, and there's been a few. I was anticipating this question, and I was like, oh, I've got a few that have really hit home. So
let's hear
them. I can share a couple.
Please.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, good. One, I'll start first with the physicality and the running and the grit and the determination. I was told right before the biggest race of my life, like, just remember, forward is a pace.
Ooh.
And I stopped and I was like, wow, that applies to everything. It doesn't matter what speed you're going. It doesn't matter what the people around you and how fast they are going. Forward is simply a pace. And I was just repeating it the entire race, and now it applies to my life. So that was one that just stuck with me for the past few years.
So good.
And then, isn't it great? Just
So
forward
good.
is a pace. That's
Yeah, I
it.
love
So simple, clean cut. I know. I was like, maybe that's the next tattoo.
Yes.
But the other one that I feel like I have truly lived my life by, and the minute I heard it, I was like, yes, that speaks to me, that resonates, is the Maya Angelou quote that's, you know, people will maybe not remember what you said, and people will maybe not remember what you did, but people will always remember the way you made them feel. And that quote has been something I try to emulate in my life, because I want people to get the warm fuzzies. I want them to feel respected. I want them to feel heard and listened to. And I want to be a positive factor in their life. And I've had people do that for me. So that's kind of the advice that I would say I'm going to move forward with, and stick to, because I love that. I don't remember the thing that I ate for breakfast yesterday, but I'm certainly going to remember the kind stranger that told me, like, my hair was on point. Like,
Totally.
I'm like, that's nice. You made me feel nice.
Yeah.
Like, thank you. So if you have kind things to say, just say them. If you have something empowering to say to someone, just say it. There will be no negativity that comes out of that.
That's so good. I love that. Thank you for sharing those. Where can everyone find you if they want to follow along with you? Because you share some really great, I feel like, inspiring, stuff on social, and even just your life and your journey. Where can people follow along?
Yeah, of course. Well, I am on Instagram. It's pretty easy. Just Joelle, JOELLE_T. That's probably where I'm most active. If people are on the Twitterverse, it's at CTV Joelle.
Great.
Definitely Instagram is the easiest way to communicate with me.
On TV, what time and where do we find you?
Yes. Okay, so it is CTV Morning Live Calgary is the name of the program. I'm on from 5:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. every day, Monday to Friday. I'm not sure what channel that is. I know that if you're listening from Saskatchewan, I do know my parents pay like $8 a month for the channel, so it might be tough. I know. And I do post a lot of the interviews on my Instagram, and
Awesome.
I post a few of them to Facebook as well. It's just Joelle Tomlinson is my professional page.
Awesome.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much again for being here with us. We've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Of course.
And Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
You're just so much fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of the Her Podcast. If you want to follow along with us, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at its.her.podcast. We can't wait to see you there.
Bye.
Adios.
Want to have your business featured on the Her Podcast? Simply send us a DM or an email to itsherpod@gmail.com.